you knock it off right now, it's gone! Moshahidi with room launches! Kaboom! From another time zone! This is comical, cartoonish, and downright ridiculous. Hey, welcome back for Season 2, Episode 18 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Last week, we were heading into the MLB All-Star Break, and the Tigers and Phillies Bat Boys were picked to represent their clubs in Atlanta. Eli Manning also passed on an ownership stake in the Giants. Then Fantasy Football Friday with my top 5 rankings for kickers and defenses. Those are the real league winners. And this week, let's get started with a recap and some things I loved and maybe didn't love from the All-Star Break in baseball. Monday night was the Home Run Derby, and I got everything I wanted out of it personally. Not having a horse in the race, I just chose to go with Cal Raleigh, as I have in kind of a lot of other things this year. I didn't even know that a catcher had never won it before, although it kind of makes sense. Even if Raleigh doesn't win MVP, this is already one of the most unique, special years that a catcher has ever had because he did, in fact, win the Home Run Derby. He switch hit a little bit in the first round, although he was doing better from the left side and he kind of recognized that, so he stuck with that for the semis and the finals. He had a tie after the first round for fourth with the Athletics' Brent Rooker, and that's when I and the rest of the world learned that the tiebreaker is actually the distance of the longest home run that the guy hit instead of any kind of swing-off. I had no idea, but keep that in mind for later on. So the distance, it came down to 0.08 of an inch, but Cal Raleigh did move on by that tiebreaker. Raleigh was also the most consistent hitter. He had 6 home runs on 6 pitches at one point in his semifinal round, but the Pirates' O'Neal Cruz was the most exciting guy in the Derby by far. The most ridiculous ball that he hit was 513 feet, 118 miles an hour. I can't help thinking that if Colorado had been hosting again this year, that Coors effect would have made it the longest home run in Derby history. As it was still only about 10 feet shorter than Sammy Sosa's longest of 524, and those measurements in 2002 weren't probably nearly as exact as we have right now. And O'Neal Cruz, he owns most of the hardest hit baseballs in recorded history, and even though that data hasn't been around for very long, neither have guys that are 6'7", 240-pound outfielders with the hardest outfield throw of all time and almost 100 percentile sprint speed and leading the NL in stolen bases. This guy is an utter freak in every sense of the word, and he'll be back in this contest probably to win one pretty soon. He also had all 5 of the longest home runs and I believe 4 out of the 5 hardest hit by exit velocity. Tuesday night was, of course, the main event, the All-Star Game, and we got probably the number one thing everybody needed out of that game, the Paul Skeens versus Tarek Skubal matchup. They had both gotten their starts moved around in the week before, so we kind of had an idea, especially as their innings were dialed back a little bit, that this had to be the case. A really fascinating story that Skubal himself shared a few days before the game, though. The Yankees' top starter and the best free agent signing of this entire year, I think maybe with Juan Soto in there somewhere, is Max Fried. Fried is a left-handed starter who is also having a Cy Young caliber season. He leads the league in wins, and his manager Aaron Boone is the All-Star manager for the American League. There were plenty of reasons to think that Fried would start this game, right? But Fried calls Skubal to ask him if Tarek would like to start. And of course, he was going to accept, you have to, but that is one of the better class acts that I've heard in a long time. I still think that those two are probably going to be the last 2 remaining in the Cy Young race in the AL at the end of the year, but when it comes right down to it, there's plenty of really good guys and good friends around the league like this, so I love it. The bad news was Skubal didn't exactly take the opportunity and run with it. Now, the NL's top 5 in the lineup, well, it was Shohei Ohtani, Ronald Acuna, Ketel Marte, Freddie Freeman, Manny Machado. Marte is the only one that might not end up a Hall of Famer, to be honest with you. And it's a good thing Marte was able to get himself a little 2-run double to put him cosmically up on the scales a little bit, because crazy enough, and pardon me, this has nothing to do with the game itself, but while Marte was in Atlanta for the break, the word is his house in Scottsdale, Arizona got robbed. This sort of string of robberies of these really high-profile rich athletes is awful. Anybody could look at the All-Star roster, and if they know where one of these guys in the game lives, then they would know what nights they won't be at home. You saw it with Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Joe Burrow, Luka Doncic. Those are just a few that have been robbed within the last year. It's crazy, it's shameful, and it's probably super expensive to hire all of their own personal security, but I'm sure that that's what many of them choose to do. Yes, I realize they're rich, but it's not all about the money. It's about feeling safe, being able to relax at home. Back to the All-Star game, the NL got 3 hits off of Skubal to open it in a row, and I can't remember the last time he's given up 3 hits in a row, to be honest with you, after Paul Skeens had a perfect inning with 2 strikeouts. Again, Marte had the 2-run double. He inside-outed a 98-mile-an-hour fastball from Skubal to right field, which is tough enough to do. And then, for what it's worth, Aaron Judge out in right field, the leading vote-getter in the AL, the presumptive MVP again. He positively jogged to go pick it up and to throw it in. He seemed like one of the very few guys that really wasn't playing particularly hard, which was sort of a callback to the old structure of the NFL Pro Bowl or anything that the NBA has tried to do recently. Nothing much happened until the 6th inning. There was a 3-run bomb from Pete Alonso. He went oppo. He's known to do that. He's one of the greatest home run hitters of our time. Then a solo shot from the Diamondbacks' Corbin Carroll, and even at 5'10", 165, he is also known to do that. That dude has crazy pop. At 6-0 National League in that 6th inning, I almost turned the game off. But then the AL scores 4 runs in the 7th. They scratch another one across in the 9th. And they're left with Bobby Witt Jr. on third and 2 outs. Stephen Kwan of the Guardians at the plate. He hits one deep behind the bag at third. Beats out an infield single to tie it. Absolute baseball cinema. And again, like everybody else, I assumed that the rules would be normal and we would go to extra innings. However, the league took the swing-off that should have been used in the home run derby and stuck it at the end of the All-Star game instead. 3 hitters for each league, 3 swings for each hitter to try and hit as many home runs as they can for all the marbles. And the managers got to choose who would go when. Then, long story short, no one particularly impressed except the Phillies' Kyle Schwarber. He earned MVP of the game. He went 3 for 3 on his swings with some bombs. And the Rays' Jonathan Aranda came close but couldn't hit any out to tie it. After a 6-6 tie in regulation, National League wins 4-3 on a swing-off for the first time in over 180 years of pro baseball. I absolutely love the swing-off, and that's number 1 on my list of loves, if you will, from the whole All-Star break. My number 2 was Cal Raleigh winning the home run derby and being the first catcher ever to do it. There were other layers to it. He was the only one ever to switch hit at any point during the Derby and win. He was the only Mariner not named Ken Griffey Jr. ever to win. He had his little brother catching for him and his dad pitching. It is impossible not to like this guy. And I have no other reason to feel anything at all about the Mariners, right? Whether he wins MVP or not, he has already had one of the greatest catcher seasons of all time. Finally, my number 3 love, I suppose, the drama of the game. Bobby Witt doubling, cutting it to 1 in the 9th inning, and Stephen Kwan, as soon as this ball came off of his bat, you could just tell it was going to be a lot of trouble. You thought, oh, we might be going to extras, except that's not how it worked out. But pitchers threw really, really hard, many of them relying primarily on fastballs. It felt like a playoff game in the late innings, and that is incredibly rare in an All-Star game, again, especially compared to other leagues. Then the 3 things I hated too. Number 1 is super personal. The Tigers had 6 players make the All-Star game, plus their bat boy, and yet set a dubious record. Skubal got hit around. Casey Mize gave up the home run to Corbin Carroll. Gleyber Torres, Riley Green, Zach McKinstry, Javi Baez, all of their position players, combined to go 0 for 8 with 3 strikeouts, and they were the first team ever to have that many representatives without a scoreless inning thrown or without anyone picking up a hit. Something tells me as the best team in baseball for the whole first half, they will be fine. I also hated the max distance as a tiebreaker in the Derby, partly because I don't believe that they can estimate it that well, especially when balls hit things that are beyond the wall, and then who knows what the flight of the ball might have exactly been after that. I don't think you can perfectly estimate. Also, I believe Brent Rooker was expecting to have a swing-off, so certainly every participant should have been briefed beforehand, and when it started to look like a tie might happen for that 4th spot to move on, they should be reminded of it again. It looked like the league was kind of making up a rule on the spot, even though I'm certain that's not what happened. Then finally, I can't say I hated the players being mic'd up. It is fun sometimes. There can be insights to be learned, but it matters a lot what players you choose and what positions you choose. Some people are a lot more natural than others with a microphone on, period. But pitchers really tend to struggle, especially in their execution and in articulating what they're trying to do, because they have really complex game plans. And how much they do between pitches, too, matters, right? If you've got a guy that shakes off a lot, who doesn't take that first sign, if you have a guy who has a complicated windup, who steps off a lot, there's a lot to it. Skubal was one of them. Clayton Kershaw was another that just, they left a lot more to be desired. Joe Davis and John Smoltz were on the broadcast team, and they really couldn't get much out of anybody, so I think they should probably leave pitchers out going forward, at least until they're off the mound. We should get more on-deck players, more players whose pitching day is already over. Coaches in the dugout, let players sit in the crowd or with their families. I think that could be a really good one, and all of those guys should have mics on. It's a creative risk, I admit that, but the All-Star Break is about fan service more than anything else, and how to do that in the most grandiose way that you can, the most creative but still catering to the fans. That's it for the MLB All-Star Break. A lot of things done really, really well and a ton of entertainment. Every single team plays on Friday to start the second half, and in fact, no one has an off day until next Thursday, the 24th. There's going to be a lot of really good games to watch, and hopefully division races start heating up a little bit more, except in the AL Central, where the Tigers are already kind of running away with it. Now to some news from NFL training camps, free agency, other things that go on during the summer. I didn't think there was going to be a lot of it. Now to some news from NFL training camps, free agency, those things that go on during the summer. There are a few position groups that are still lagging behind when it comes to the contracts at the top of the market. Quarterback is already covered. I probably don't have to tell you how many average or even below average starting quarterbacks are making, $50 million or more a year. Receiver is now over $40 million at the top of the market with Jamar Chase, of course. Running back is half of that, and everybody knows that that's not nearly enough. That's not really the focus of this episode, but it's in the back of everybody's minds. And offenses will always, on average, take up a larger percentage of each team's salary cap than the defense will. But there is at least one position group that still needs a boost, and the Chiefs are probably going to be the ones to completely change that, for better or for worse. Trey Smith has been Kansas City's starter at right guard since he was drafted in 2021. I won't tell you that he's bad because he's not. I don't tend to particularly grill anybody unless there's like a glaring statistical weakness or some eye test issue or a character concern. What I will tell you is that with one Pro Bowl to his name and the 14th best grade among guards by Pro Football Focus for this year, Trey Smith earned himself the richest contract in NFL history for a guard. Over the next 4 years, he's going to make over $92 million and take up as much as 8.2% of the team's salary cap at its highest. The previous high for a guard was the Falcons' Chris Lindstrom at $20.5 million, although that was a super rare 5-year deal. You don't see a lot of those, so it does have a bit more total value to it. Again, we're talking an average annual value here. The point here is that this is not a small little one-upping. It is a serious level up to the whole market. Other things you'll want to know about Trey Smith off the bat to judge the value. He does commit a goodly number of penalties. That's never a perfect measure of performance, but it does measure negative yardage or even points that may have been taken off of the board. So he committed 9 penalties last year, which ranked 126th of 136 eligible offensive guards. The biggest issue was 6 holding calls, and that might sound like it sunk him and it tanked his value, and yet still, he ended the year with 0 sacks. He was in the 4th and final year of his rookie contract. That tends to be the make or break year for most players, where they can either earn themselves a very healthy second contract or could be out of the league. Most people would say, no sacks, okay, you earned all of your money, right? End of discussion. And yet the wrinkle that gets thrown in is when it comes to any interior line position, that is guards and centers, how much they have to work together. The more you watch film really granularly, you really look at offensive line play, like you double team somebody on a majority of all plays. There's a double team somewhere. When you see a defensive line get consistent early wins in the run or the pass game on the interior, you don't really have to look anywhere else because you know how the game is pretty much being won and lost in most cases. And the inverse is just as true when you see a quarterback that never has to move off his spot and he has plenty of time to throw, or when you see a full front seven getting absolutely caved in and a running back with monster holes to run through, you also know. The Chiefs built a juggernaut inside. Their center, Creed Humphrey, has a claim to being their best player overall, not named Pat Mahomes. And he was the first team All-Pro center this year and also didn't allow a single sack on the year. And their left guard, Joe Thuney, he was ranked ahead of Trey Smith by a couple of spots by PFF. He was only called for one penalty, and he also did not allow a sack for the year. Plus, I know I mentioned this a few months ago, but Thuney was 10th in the Offensive Player of the Year vote as a guard. It's bazonkers. Now, Thuney had to play a couple of games late in the year at left tackle, even into the playoffs, but essentially, the Chiefs' starting interior line went an entire season without allowing a sack. As unbelievable, as generational as that is, you might imagine that their tackles were equally as poor, which is true, arguably the worst tackle unit in the league. And yet, they trade Joe Thuney to the Bears, then sign the least valuable of these three offensive linemen, albeit still a very good one, to the largest guard contract in the history of the league. I don't see the vision even as somebody that loves the trenches. Nonetheless, they lock him down for 4 years, and he gets rich. And now we have two huge walk-off hits on a Thursday afternoon right before I go to record. I am not sure why this happens so often. But you know what I mean? Things that I wasn't necessarily planning on including, and now, I can't ignore this. The first one is the inevitable. It's TJ Watt and the Steelers finally coming to their senses. TJ is going to be the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, that benchmark that every huge name wants. 3 years, $123 million for an AAV of $41 million, almost $1 million more than Jamar Chase. It's procedural as much as it is about commitment when a team is in this position, because to say that the team and the franchise would crumble without TJ is probably not far off. Pittsburgh seems to be the only team in the league that's actively trying to get older too, and this contract will keep him there beyond the age of 33. That probably means he's going to retire in Pittsburgh, whether it's after this current deal runs out or maybe he gets, one more for old time's sake on a 1 or 2 year vet deal. 33 would actually be a very fitting, very poetic age if he decided to retire then because of what JJ did at the age of 33. And granted, JJ Watt did not do it all with one team, but when he was finishing out his career with the Cardinals in 2022, he had 12.5 sacks, 18 tackles for loss, he knocked down 7 passes, forced and recovered a fumble. He still looked about as good as ever. The Steelers were pretty much a middle-of-the-pack defensive team this year. They were 15th in yards per game, 16th in yards per play, but they somehow still managed to be 7th in scoring defense. They add all of these veterans over the age of 30, Darius Slay, Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Rodgers. They just might be the toughest team to predict now in the entire league. If they had 4 wins and you told me Rodgers is going to go get injured or benched by October, I would believe it. If you tell me Rodgers plays really well and DK Metcalf works out and Ramsey and Darius Slay and TJ are all great, they're playing at their primes, then I think this team could win 13 games and have a home playoff game. I would also believe that. And the second walk-off hit for the day is Damian Lillard heading back to the Trailblazers. Now this I did not have on the bingo board for July. He signed his 5th NBA contract for 3 years at $42 million, a big homecoming and veterans discount. We already know that he's not going to get back on the court until 2027, after the Achilles tear from the playoffs this year. So I presumed he was going to sit around and collect dust for a year, especially after the buyout from the Bucks. Not so fast. Now for him to leave and join one of the worst teams in the West, and they probably still will be for the foreseeable future, it says a lot about him. It really puts him in rare air in terms of loyalty. He made 7 out of his 9 All-Star games with Portland. He is their all-time leader in points and made threes. He won Rookie of the Year there, and now he gets a great chance to play mentor for a year. He turned 35 this week, actually, on Tuesday, but I don't see why he wouldn't have more in the tank after a year off to recover and get stronger. he still scored 25 points a game this year behind another one of those MVP-level Giannis seasons that we take for granted every single year, but he doesn't actually win it because Nikola Jokic exists. And, of course, SGA. He was on a maximum deal with Milwaukee, so I still struggle to understand exactly what the money significance is. I believe that with the buyout he got, the Bucks can spread what they would have owed him for the final 2 years of the deal, being 2025 and 26, over a greater amount of time, but they'll still owe him the $112 million of that deal, and then Portland will chip in the $14 million per year. For a guy that won't play any basketball until 2027, that's incredible. It's got a LeBron coming home to Cleveland sort of feel to it. The last year of the deal is 2028, and it's rumored to have a player option so that he could choose to leave again. The money is wild, the situation is wild, but eventually, on the back end, it might actually be a really basketball-smart move, and they could get great value for a guaranteed lock future Hall of Famer. And another week down. Good news, I'm going to finally make it out to a Tigers game this year. I have not gone in far too long. We'll be going later in August, so I'll mention it again as it comes close. I am almost tempted to count all the way forward from whoever starts their first game after the All-Star break to just guess who the starter might be. For a lot of other teams, you probably could, but not the A.J. Hinch Tigers. Besides that, I'm about to get heavy on the Fantasy Football Fridays, and hopefully my drafts get done before the end of July. I will try, depends on my league mates, but be warned. Thanks for coming back week after week, or if you're new here, happy to have you. Either way, check out all my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, @TheVoiceOfTanner, X, just Voice of Tanner, YouTube, you know how it goes, it's the whole thing spelled out with spaces. Leave a like, comment, and share with a sports talk lover you know. Catch you next week. This has been Season 2, Episode 18 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
No.
Oh, you knock it off right now, it's gone! Mo Shahidi with room launches! Kaboom! From another time zone. This is comical, cartoonish, and downright ridiculous.